Sweet. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. It is Monday, July 24th. I have a really fantastic individual joining me, Pat from The Giving Block. He is a co-founder of one of the most prominent nonprofit or tech for nonprofit organizations with The Giving Block, in my opinion. I've really enjoyed getting to talk with him the last couple of weeks and have worked with his team in various ways over the last 6 to 8 months. If you remember, they joined us for our predictions nonprofit growth lab session back in January, which feels like 10 years ago now. But anyways, thank you for joining us. This is going to be much more casual, much more of a conversation. I'm really excited to have y'all join us and get this thing moving. Now, before we get Pat introduced here, today's roadmap kind of covering what we're expecting in our conversation. We're going to keep things loose, a little less formal than normal, but here's kind of what we can expect. We'll touch on a few things from The Giving Block's Crypto Philanthropy in 2023 benchmark report. We'll talk about how and why that should matter to you as a nonprofit, regardless of your size. I have a few notes down here in my notebook. I'm going to continue to look at those, but things like what are the tax implications of receiving a gift or a donation in crypto versus cash, right? Where in the world does NFTs come in this equation? If you're more into that, like I myself have found more success in that side of the world than with Bitcoin so far, but we'll talk about that. Also, like, what is adoption like? I know that there's some really great numbers that Pat and his team have put together over the last 2 years in regards to the top 100 nonprofits and what they're choosing to do with crypto philanthropy. And then also we'll leave open some Q&A. I have my teammate Brenna running the operations behind the scenes. So if you do have any questions, please use that comment section as you join and as we go through. I'll make sure that we pull in the questions as we go through these topics. Answer those in live time. Much more using past knowledge on this than mine, but I digress. All right, cool. So a couple of upcoming events from the GoodUnited perspective. August 2nd through 4th, we're showing up at the Bridge Conference. We're really excited to be attending and sponsoring the Bridge Tech event, which is happening the day before that conference officially kicks off. If you happen to be in the area of the Bridge Conference within those days, let me know. I'll be happy to connect one of our team members with y'all and get a conversation going around digital fundraising, Facebook fundraising, and social media fundraising as a whole. August 22nd is our next Facebook fundraising bootcamp event. The first one we did in June, we actually booked it out and maxed it out at 250 plus people joining us. This one's focusing on challenging on Facebook. And for all of you that are wondering what that might be, we're going through the ins and outs of things. Remember the Ice Bucket Challenge way back a couple of years ago? That's the OG version, what we look at. But how do you run a successful challenge on Facebook? What are the tools and the resources you need to be thinking about, both from a monetary as well as a strategic perspective? And we'll actually give you some statistics on what you can expect to benchmark against if you do want to take that first step forward into the world of challenges on Facebook, or FB challenges, or however you talk about those in your nonprofit. September 13th, I'm really excited that we're joining the peer-to-peer forum with their demo days. That's happening, I believe we got the midday slot, give or take, but we're excited to show what our new platform for marketing automation on social media looks like and how you can leverage that. So that's a free event, and you'll be seeing some communications from us. And then finally, we're looking forward. It's not too early to think about Giving Tuesday, and maybe Pat will have some thoughts about how to leverage crypto specifically for this event every November. But we're going to take some time mid-October to talk about how you can take advantage of Facebook specifically. And many typically always matches. I'm not sure, they haven't announced it for this year, what they're doing, but the last couple of years they have been matching efforts. So it's basically free money, free revenue, free fundraising dollars for your mission. We're going to walk you through how to use Facebook specifically to do that. Now, if you want to register for that bootcamp, give that quick scan of that, or you can also go through Brenna. If you can drop in the link to the chat for us as well, so we can click for those on the desktop. But that's going to be a free event. We've already got 51 people signed up of the 250. And that typically fills up usually within a week or two of us airing. So jump on there too. If you can't make that time and date, it'll be available on demand that afternoon. So make sure to check it out and bring along a couple of my internal team members. And I'm really excited about the content, specifically around the community engagement strategy, the ad strategy, and providing a baseline of expectations around how long it's going to take to actually pull off a successful challenge on Facebook. There's a lot that goes into it. We're going to try and cram that all into an hour. All right, I'm done talking for now. Who I've got coming on board here is Pat. Pat and I just jumped together through conversation the last couple of weeks. It turns out that some of my thoughts and processes around marketing within the nonprofit space are very much similar to Pat's experience. But Pat is the co-founder of the Giving Block. The Giving Block, I'm probably going to butcher this, Pat, so you can come in and clean this up. But really helps nonprofits leverage the power of crypto and take advantage of that kind of next wave, next iteration of fundraising opportunity. It's again similar to what we do on Facebook fundraising. Meet the supporter where they're at and meet them how they want to give. How did I do on that?
Yeah, no, that's good. That's a good summary of what we do. Thanks for having me on. The only thing I would tack on is we do, as of like a little over a year and a half ago, we started doing stocks and DAF giving just for the same reasons, right? Donors mostly under the age of 40 who want to do major gifts through non-cash kind of investment type giving. Those are the areas we've expanded into after starting on crypto.
Perfect. And the stock actually is really interesting. I'll get that to perhaps later in terms of the future. I have it marked for NFTs, stablecoin, and stocks. The stablecoin was interesting because it provides a little bit more, in my idea, a simplistic view, looking at graphs, a little bit more stable option and access to those like me who I don't have the time to get into the nitty gritty of things, but I do like to diversify my investments and my thought process there. Okay. From what we got today, I'm excited. I got bullet points. I'm going to keep referencing this, and I need to keep my glasses on because I write very small compared to what I can read. So if I glance down, that's what I'm doing, Pat. For those that are on this already, there's typically two reasons that we've got feedback over the last year when we've done crypto-themed content. Isn't this a bad idea for my nonprofit? Or how do I start to think about this and not like basically get ourselves into a hole? Because it is for a lot of nonprofits something I would consider to be, I don't want to say risk is the right word here, and we discussed this earlier this week, but it is something that you want to plan and mitigate and start to think about what are the possible outcomes. But let's start at the very beginning. What is cryptocurrency from your point of view, and from specifically when nonprofits are looking at this, like what do they need to know fundamentally what this is?
Yeah, definitely. So kind of starting with what cryptocurrency is. My background prior to the Giving Block was working at a nonprofit, and my now co-founder is the one who talked me into crypto. I was listening to a lot of podcasts, was against cryptocurrency as an investment. I was investing in stocks and trying to figure that out kind of early out of college. And then Alex ultimately talked me into it by explaining to me how it works. The long and short of it is pretty much cryptocurrency allowed for a digital money / mode of investing online, in which for Bitcoin, the first cryptocurrency in particular, you could not create fake units of that cryptocurrency on the ledger. So solve for something called the double spend problem, where you kind of spend the same money twice or inject additional supply where it didn't exist, kind of manipulating the record keeping. Blockchain, the record keeping system that they created with Bitcoin in particular, just meant that you would have to hack into and control more than half of the computers involved in that network at the same time, which is virtually impossible, and get them all to agree to a transaction that didn't happen, or to a change to how the system worked that would allow for you to create additional Bitcoins. So because it was virtually impossible to change the record keeping system, it meant that people were able to move these units of cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, the first one, back and forth between each other in exchange for goods and services online. And they were able to do that without any centralized government issuing the currency, and without any sort of contracting or legal system necessary to ensure the money got where it was going, so long as the code remained unchanged, which the blockchain kind of kept that way. Everyone knew that they could ultimately hold value or send it other places with a 100% guarantee that it's getting where it's going. So it's really kind of the first digital form of both currency and then ultimately mode of investing, and that you can buy into and out of it for whatever price people are willing to pay for it. That could exist without any sort of centralized government or issuer that ultimately had the control to change the rules.
Yes. Thank you for doing that much more fluently than I could. And is that the same thing as NFT for those that are watching that are new to this? I know NFT is a buzzword. It's been around, picking up steam for the last couple of years. Is that the same thing? Different thing? Kind of same commonalities there? What's that look like?
Yeah, so in the same way with like cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, the fact that you can't change the record keeping system, right? You can't say that someone didn't send you money or no one can tell you that you don't own the units that are sitting in your wallet. It's 100% guarantee. When you think about an NFT, it's just a non-fungible token. So that same string of code that pretty much tells you it's this unit of Bitcoin versus another unit of Bitcoin, you can assign to something other than a currency. So in this case, the main use case for NFTs is digital art, but it could also be something like an online version of your passport or your ID. A code that lets you into a restaurant or a club or whatever it might be. Ticketing. It pretty much allows you to assign that same individual trait, right, that identifier to something like a virtual piece of art. And then people can exchange that back and forth online. So you assign it to, say, an image when you release it. And that allows people to ultimately trade these things back and forth, oftentimes kind of like baseball cards, or ultimately like a Mona Lisa, depending on how sophisticated it gets. Some of these things sell for like, I think the most was $66 million. They can send this back and forth, and you can guarantee that you're actually in possession of the original unit of, say, a digital piece of art. So before that, in the same way that if you're sharing MP3s or whatever digital record back and forth, it's really hard to know verifiably who actually holds the original unit. People can go in and change the metadata and say they have an original. Using blockchain in the same way that you can't pretend to own someone else's Bitcoin, you can't pretend to own someone's original piece of art. That allows for people to trade these things back and forth and verifiably prove that they own an original. So created a virtual equivalent of the physical kind of art ecosystem.
That's great. And for those of you who've been on nonprofit with that for the last year, I'm a huge basketball guy. So I'm in the Top Shot and the Dapper stuff. And my wife always, because it's digital trading cards. So it's a great correlation and almost like the exact way that I latched onto it. And oh yeah, this makes sense. I'm willing to go spend more than $5. So yeah, I won't tell my wife how much. If you're watching, love you, Amy. So from that aspect, though, those are two different things, same different outcomes. I'll get into the tax implications because there's a lot of staggering numbers that go with the digital aspect of things, and that's important. But first, before that, like the work we do at the Giving Block is really interesting. What you and I were talking about. Specifically last week around, how you help nonprofits and who actually this tool is for. So as much as we like to think about who it is for and who it isn't for, is there kind of guideline that helps you understand, is a nonprofit ready to take that potential kind of first step into the world of crypto philanthropy and fundraising, or are there steps that need to be taken in order to get there?
Yeah, definitely. It's a really good question. So there's kind of, I guess, two categories of risk. One is the actual kind of exigent risk that you would want to remove, kind of take off the table through solutioning. So the classic ones that nonprofits think of that are ultimately non-existent risks now, but could have been in the past, are things like price volatility, right? So a nonprofit not wanting to receive a crypto donation, ultimately the value goes down, right? Because that's scary. Depending on what cryptos you take, if there's not liquidity, kind of these small cap new cryptocurrencies, that could be the case. But for almost all top cryptocurrencies, same thing as like penny stocks versus if you're taking stocks through something like Fidelity, there's hundreds of millions of users, there's billions of dollars of liquidity on the order books heading in either direction. So long as you have a program like ours, which attaches to the acceptance tool that just scans the account and sells any units of cryptocurrency 24 hours a day for the going rate instantaneously as they hit the account. Price volatility is an issue for the donors and investors, but not the nonprofit. So like that would be a type of risk. Nonprofits historically have done things like, and donors will ask nonprofits to do this sometimes, which is why it's important to have a good tool. They'll be like, take it through a wallet, right? Which isn't attached to an exchange account. So now you're holding the cryptocurrency, but you have to open a separate account to move it over and actually sell it, or take it directly through an exchange account, and then they have to log in and sell it. And then you're kind of waiting for the individuals who received it to sell it and dealing with price volatility. Price volatility is one of those risks, so that's kind of eliminated. Another piece of the risk component, like you were asking about in the original question at the top here, is kind of like, what do you do in terms of like which cryptocurrencies you decide to accept and like how you partner with these other institutions. People look at some of the crypto exchanges or companies that have reputational risk. It's ultimately the same as any other type of investment. You don't necessarily have to have a formal brand partnership to accept stocks from somebody who invests in, let's say, Exxon, whatever the company might be. People can place their own investments and then ultimately donate to you, so that piece goes away. The real risk, I would say, like the consideration when nonprofits need to think about accepting this stuff, isn't related to which cryptos you take or how it sells. All of those things are kind of solved for with solutioning. The main risk is kind of wasting time. So the two things we ask nonprofits are, A, do you feel like you're good at the internet in some fundamental sense, just some baseline, right? Do you have social media accounts, right? Do you engage younger donors effectively? Are you only doing things like direct mail, let's say? In which case you might have some issues even just speaking to some of these things if you don't have younger people through the organization, or just anyone, right, who's super interested in the tech. You're just going to have to try to figure out how to speak to these things and how to find new donors. That could be a lift. And then the second piece is, are you good at fundraising, which we ask for. So some nonprofits look at crypto, especially if they're on the smaller end, as almost like a lottery ticket. They're looking at it to find new donors that don't exist in their base yet, not really to optimize their existing donor ecosystem or to figure out things like how to steward crypto donors, increase their gift size. If it's not a thing you're trying to get good at from a fundraising standpoint, you're trying to kind of turn on a button and hope new people give to you. Those are the two things that ultimately I've seen nonprofits try to like open a Twitter account for the first time and start creating content, which isn't necessarily effective, or try to figure out stewardship for the first time to steward crypto donors when really you should learn some of that foundational stuff. Any nonprofit who's got a decent individual giving program and has some folks at the nonprofit who are relatively tech savvy, it tends to go quite well. So let's say 95% of nonprofits are able to at the very least accept it, and a lot of them, of course, are able to fundraise it super effectively.
No, that makes sense. And there's that segmentation piece too, where it's understanding who your supporters are or who you want them to be too, which is important, right? It's a big piece of what we try to help nonprofits work through on the social media aspect of, it won't be for everyone. It won't find your entire, house file base on Facebook or giving crypto, but it's about attracting the next wave of supporters for your mission, your brand, and allowing them or giving them the opportunity to give where they want to give instead of shoehorning them into the way we, the nonprofit, want them to give to us, right? The more we focus on that, and I'm saying as a nonprofits in general, the more you start to understand that like this isn't, we're well past we can almost like the turn and burn thing where you can ask someone to give every month, every week, every day. And we've seen a huge drop off in Facebook when it comes to that. So the organizations, the stats, especially within was an M&R benchmark report, not only around emails but about Facebook fundraising, was a little bit alarming. Granted, there was some missing context around that, but only 1% of, for us, Facebook giving came 1% of it from Facebook of total contributions in 2022, which is pretty crazy. And the numbers per supporter, per fundraiser were seemingly down, although they were still better than emails. But we also understand that people jump into things like TikTok, Instagram, if they keep their algorithms clean, that could be a really potential cool place to see more fundraising strategies developed. Threads is everyone wants to because it's the hot new thing. But again, there's got such different diverse groups of segmented people for each of those. So we can get into the age, demographics, and all of that fun stuff. And we'll save that for another conversation. I always get roasted on these for calling this out, but like crypto is no different than this, where again, my mom and dad probably, I talked to my mom about this last week. She's like, yeah, you're right. I'll never get into crypto wallets, crypto giving, crypto anything. They just don't care. Facebook is their thing. Me, I'm a lot different, right? Especially when I got to see some of the tax implications for the nonprofit for my gifts. And well, again, I'm going to save that. I keep touching it. I'm saving it as much as I can. From that perspective, Pat, like the segmentation, is this kind of a boil the ocean type of thing, or is this just an additional channel, fundraising channel that nonprofits could add to their growing portfolio?
Yeah, can I one quick thing on something you're touching on, which is huge too, that I just want to hit on. Like there's something about new technologies that tricks all of us, including myself, into thinking that like people need to understand it from an engineering standpoint. Like it's very, I find it weird and interesting with crypto now that I'm on like the other side of it. Like I've interfaced with it enough to where I'm more comfortable with it. But like I have a political science degree. Like I was working at a nonprofit, like no financial education, let alone technical education. Like I can't write code or anything like that. For some reason, like we look at things like, you know, microwaves and Bluetooth or a car, right? And we interface with technology, just even basic engineering, like the electricity in a home, all the time without feeling the need to have this like deep technical understanding of it. If you go to a bank, right, you're not thinking about how the Federal Reserve works and like why we departed from a gold standard. But with things like cryptocurrency, with NFTs, with ChatGPT, with things like new social media platforms, I think nonprofits think the learning curve is a lot harder than it is, because the technology that it's built on is so sophisticated. With cryptocurrency, right, like you're saying, with Facebook fundraisers, whatever else it might be, it's just kind of a matter of understanding, I think, like how big is the opportunity size? Like when does it get to a tipping point with something like Facebook, right? It's inappropriate for a nonprofit to not have a Facebook page at this point. Like we're many years past like that threshold. It's just something you have to have. Like when does it get to that point with something like cryptocurrency? I think it's just, understanding the size and scale of it. Like with cryptocurrency, right? 90% of millennial millionaires are crypto investors at this point. It's like 94% millennial and Gen Z users. It's hundreds of millions of people have this stuff. It's more than $1 trillion market cap. Like it's not going away. And young people who have money to such a staggering degree are tying it up in cryptocurrency. Like it's going to be the most tax optimized donation method, to your point about like the tax incentives, which we'll get to. You got to accept it, of course. And then it comes down to how you fundraise it. Like I think on the fundraising piece, nonprofits think they have to be able to like speak to how blockchain works, when really the most successful nonprofits we see in this, like some of the, again, like you said, blue chips, we have about 200 nonprofits who are $100 million plus on the platform, thousands of other charities, but those big ones with sophisticated fundraising programs, they're just letting donors know that they accept it for the most part, and then stewarding them differently, understanding that like the market has gone up or down based on like how much of a gift that they're going to ask for, or just telling people which cryptocurrencies they accept and letting them give that way. I think people think it's like if you're buying a car, you have to understand like how pistons fire within an engine to pick the car effectively. It's not necessarily true. Like, you know, it's going to get you from point A to point B. I just wanted to touch on that piece, the technical understanding. I think a lot of people think they need to study blockchain or like AI to use ChatGPT. You can literally just go on ChatGPT and send it a message that's like, hey, can you create an app for me? And it'll code it for you. Don't overestimate how much of a technical understanding of something like you need to interface with it. Like you're interfacing with amazing technology, like the phone in your pocket, televisions, cameras, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, like all of the time with no engineering understanding. Don't be as scared, I guess, is the main thing I wanted to hit on. And I'm sorry, we can jump off to your next question here, but I felt like that was important because you're touching on all of these platforms and how much of a learning curve it is. It's like, it kind of wasn't for me. You just kind of learned that it does some things that other things don't do, and people are going to keep investing in it. We might as well accept this stuff.
Yeah, it's to that point. It's great to even think about. If you can't expect people to go to a channel, let alone give, if you don't have it represented on your website. And usually that's a step that most nonprofits are pretty good about their like basic social channels. But you think about even a single button to accept crypto or to lead them to a forum to start that process is an easy first step. Now, obviously, there's the processing aspect, which I, for one, have brought you on because I don't know that process in the crypto world. For Facebook, it's easy. I could tell you, well, there's really one way in and one way out. That's through Meta right now with giving tools. From the processing aspect, though, and this dovetails into it. For me, I know like it's such a great gig to process your fundraising through Meta because they cover your fees. Like there's no 2.9% processing fee. It is 100% of the funds go to the nonprofit. And this gets into some of the tax conversation too. I'm going to show real quick my screen here from the annual crypto giving. Now, talk me through this one, because when I read this a week ago and again this morning, it caught me off guard because that is a big difference when you think about taxation in option B and option A, comparing the two, right? And I know there's some stipulations that are in that small print in terms of like the context of what this is. Can you walk me through really what this means, though, at a normal scale? I mean, unless someone's getting $1 million Bitcoin donation every day. Maybe it's an outlier, but still the end result of that $0 taxes paid by the donor is such a cool thing. What does this actually mean in like real normal terms?
Yeah, this is the basis of why we created the company to begin with. And for like a couple years, we always referred to have you seen Napoleon Dynamite? Do you know that movie?
Oh, way too many times.
Do you know the scene where he's like trying to feed lasagna to the llama and he's like trying to get the spoon like into the llama and it's like trying to get its head out of the way? Like this
Mm-hmm.
is this is the part, right? We'll explain the tax setup here, but like it's so like obviously good from like the donor side and the nonprofit side. So long as again, like it immediately liquidates, there's not a price volatility issue, there's not like compliance risk, right? When an individual can give non-cash assets, right? So when they put you in an estate plan, when they're giving a house, a car, stocks, whatever it might be, um, individuals who have investments, including cryptocurrency, who can give that to a charity, the charity doesn't pay capital gains tax. So if you transfer that investment directly to a charity, the charity gets the full amount of money. So like that's great in and of itself, right? If you were the individual who sold it, you'd of course have to pay those taxes and give the charity just what was left over, which is usually, long-term capital gains federally is 20%, and then in California, I think it's like 13%. So like call it 30%, whatever the national average, somewhere between 25 and 33. Huge chunk of that money just goes away, doesn't reach the charity. So that means the nonprofit gets less money. The donor gets a much smaller tax write-off, and they're just paying tax for no reason. Like no one wants to do that. And historically, for things like stocks, and then cryptocurrency for a little while, people were just dumping this money into DAFs where like 80% of it gets locked up indefinitely. Like 80% of the money that gets thrown into a DAF, I think it's $250 billion now is what's sitting in DAFs, which is like more than half of the entire nonprofit giving ecosystem, just like locked up in an account. People are like, maybe I'll issue the grants out later. Because they can't give it directly to a charity, right? Because charities aren't asking for it. So like you think about how insanely different it is to give the non-cash asset to the nonprofit versus just eating all of that tax liability on the non-cash, and how much wilder that gets as you go up the ladder in gift size, right? If you're giving $10 million, you've got some in a very appreciated asset that you've invested in and some in cash, like you're looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars, sometimes millions of dollars in tax liability. And in terms of the ultimate write-off that you're getting, right? In terms of how you spread out these gifts and give it to the charity. So donors who have any appreciated non-cash asset, crypto and stocks are the easiest to transfer. There's a massive incentive to give this way. And the nonprofits who just ask for things like stocks, now who ask for things like crypto effectively, get so much more of it. What always kind of blew our mind on the tax incentive piece is like, even in the early days when we were talking to Save the Children's, United Way, St. Jude, like some of these really big nonprofits with massive fundraising programs, like what we found out quickly is the active solicitation of these gifts in general is oftentimes non-existent. They're kind of like, oh, if someone wants to give this to us, they'll call us, right? We'll put like a phone number on our website, or we'll leave like a PDF with brokerage instructions, and someone will just navigate this process. They'll probably call us. They'll send us an email if they want to send this stuff, which is like, you mentioned it on forums and Facebook and everything else. Like people are willing, nonprofits will pay like 5 to 8% for like good donor forms, for their donate button, taking a credit card gift, like they want it to be easily discoverable and everything navigates to it. There's so much thought that goes in. But for some reason, up until pretty recently, nonprofits have felt like if I have a donate Bitcoin option in my checkout flow, or if I have like a donate stocks tab on my site that has like brokerage instructions sitting there and a phone number to call, people will just like go out of their way to like reach out and send these transfers to us. Which of course, I mean, it's not true for credit cards, not true for any donation method, and especially not like these super tax optimized gifts where they're already on these other platforms. So the sad part for a while was people were just dumping crypto into donor advised fund accounts, or some of these people, right, younger people in particular, who weren't working with financial advisors or tax advisors, they're buying crypto on Coinbase and stocks on Robinhood and doing the taxes on TurboTax. No one even told them about the tax incentive, right? Like they're just completely unaware that their appreciated investments are a giving option. So they have a charity asking them for $20 a month with a credit card, and they've got $1 million sitting in a Coinbase account. And every single year they're buying and selling these assets and they're just paying the taxes, right? They're just eating tax liability, exiting these positions and going on into the world. And a lot of these people have dreams to make a bunch of money and ultimately give this bigger gift to a charity someday. And if a charity was just simply putting this option in front of them with a little tax education, some of these folks on an annual basis, they're like, oh, I can give $95,000 to this charity right now. and it eliminates my capital gains tax burden. I get this bigger write-off. Like, this would be the year to do it. And that happens every single year with a tax deadline of December 31st, unless they're throwing their money in a DEF, and then ultimately the tax incentive is already taken advantage of, right? They're getting the full benefits. They can issue that grant whenever, or they don't even know the option exists. So in short, crypto is just as tax optimized as stocks. That's ultimately why we do crypto and stocks together, because same tax incentive. And then B, the ability to send that crypto to a charity in a few clicks through just a checkout flow, like you would with a credit card. The same thing now we do with stocks, is ultimately what any major donor under the age of 40 is going to expect, right? Like, people aren't gonna, send a fax to order a pizza. Like, when it comes to getting a tax incentive and like going through all of the process, they're 15 phone calls with an accountant or whatever. Like, if you give them a bunch of additional steps and burden, and they can just go on something like Charity Vest and deposit $1 million in 15 seconds, get the full advantage, like, nonprofits just aren't going to see that money. So building, I guess, a process that donors can give you this stuff in a few clicks, super important. And then B, actively asking for it, especially for individuals under the age of 40. Like, a lot of this money just simply isn't online in the nonprofit ecosystem because they're unaware of the fact that the charity would even accept it.
That makes sense. It's so you're telling me that my $177 and penny crypto isn't going to give me that tax break that I'm looking for. But it's a little bit. It's a similar idea to when for-profit companies started putting the option to use PayPal at checkout. I would love to know the conversion metrics on that. And I buy stuff all the time back in the day, which was like 5 years ago. Like, it was a lot of it's through PayPal. So like, oh, that's a slush fund. Awesome. But like, that's the same kind of idea. I would have never maybe even either converted or even thought about it if that option wasn't there when I went to go, in this case, check out and buy something. But same idea and concept when you're giving. Why Facebook exists, why GoodUnited exists, why you exist with the Giving Block. It's another way for us to be able to interact, capture, yes, that initial funds through means that the supporter wants to give, but then it's that what next piece too that I know we're both just as passionate about. I'm keeping an eye on time too. I'm keeping my checklist. We're actually doing a non-shabby job at making sure I'm covering everything that we wanted to cover, Pat. Let's flip things over. I did promise a few hot takes, but before we get there, let's talk about what the future looks like. The future can be 6 months, it could be 12 months, it could be 5 years down the road. I know that report, which I'll send out again to everyone that registered, follow up a way for you to break this down. But there's a lot of interesting thoughts and kind of things that you did now with the team. Now, granted, this was a projection, right? And just like all projections, there are probably some variance, but you probably are not just pulling these numbers out of your hat. I would imagine not. Let me share my screen real quick again and cycle in on this, like what this forecast looks out from 27 to 34 of this lovely year of the 2000s. 10 billion donated in a single calendar year in the time 2034 rolls around is not some small shabby feat. And I'm assuming that there's some ways that we get there. First is that check mark in really 4 years, which isn't honestly that far away, especially as you look how fast the year has flown by this year. $1 billion total in fundraising donations all time, and then you're stepping it up exponentially, right? From what we're viewing here, what is the most exciting thing from your point of view? Is it the total funds that's processed or donated overall, or is there little micro steps that really are the triggers thing that for you gets you really excited?
Yeah, definitely. So I guess two things. One, in terms of how we come up with the numbers, and then two, like you're saying, what do we think is going to get us there, and what I'm ultimately excited by from a trend standpoint. So our math on this was like pretty conservative. We just took firm numbers and created kind of a projection out of it. So what we did is we just took like the past 5 years of Bitcoin historical data on just price action up, down, including obviously the bear market, not just the parabolic rise into 2021. And just based on how much cryptocurrencies in general were going up over any period of time as like an average per month standpoint, we just took as a ratio, what is the average effect over space and time? And then how much donation volume are we seeing in cryptocurrency, respective of Bitcoin's price action? So for instance, we have this thing called the Crypto Philanthropy adoption index, we would look at things like if the price of Bitcoin went from $70,000 a unit to like today at $30,000 a unit, how did that impact giving? Did giving go down more than Bitcoin went down? And then the same thing, right? Cryptocurrencies go up a lot over a period. Is giving going up faster or slower than that? And just by pegging those two numbers together over the last 5 years of data, we just do a direct projection into the year with a deceleration rate, knowing that like it obviously won't grow at the same pace over time. We looked at, yeah, that's pretty much it. How much cryptocurrency prices can be expected to move over space and time. And then how much giving we see proportionate to crypto's price movement. In terms of, I guess, what I'm most excited about this, when you look at things like the first $1 billion, the first $10 billion, we're already past $1 billion in crypto giving. These are in individual calendar years, though, that we'd like to see this. As a ratio of how much is invested in cryptocurrency as a market cap versus how much is given each year, it's still far behind stock, which ultimately comes down to education. Like there's so much crypto wealth that isn't being asked for in the nonprofit space versus how much wealth is in stocks where people are actually aware of these giving options, either because they're working with advisors or because nonprofits actively solicit it. So just the baseline idea of more nonprofits asking for crypto, or at least presenting it to their donors as an option, I think is the biggest barrier between us and growth in the market. A lot of donors just aren't thinking of their crypto investments as donation options because nonprofits aren't thinking about crypto as donation options universally enough, or at least presenting them, even when they have an option maybe buried on their site. That's a huge opportunity for us. And then I would say B is, of course, what every nonprofit is thinking about, is the great wealth transfer. Just today already, if you're thinking about like what does a crypto donor look like, crypto investors are late 20s, early 30s, kind of as an average. They have a higher average income on an annual basis than any city in America, including Silicon Valley. If you put them all in one place, they'd be the richest city in America. Average gift size is between $5,000 and $15,000 already. And their motivation, propensity to give, according to Fidelity, if someone on their platform is investing in stocks versus investing in stocks and crypto, their odds of giving $1,000 a month went up by, I think, close to 40%, or not $1,000 a month, more than $1,000 a year, a 40% difference. So their propensity to give, given by or driven by all of the market volatility, the tax incentives, ultimately the buzz around the space and the growth, the new wealth that's being created. It's a uniquely generous, uniquely high income, high net worth, uniquely young and tax motivated giving bracket. And you think about them being the recipients, right, of tens of trillions of dollars in the great wealth transfer. You take that and you overlap it with 94% of these users are millennials and Gen Zs. Of course, more of their investments and their giving will ultimately move into crypto. So already today, right, there's tens of millions of dollars in most calendar years, or tens of millions of users rather, in most average calendar years in the US who have appreciated crypto as a tax optimized giving donation, giving option. And then you look at that across space and time, knowing that more of their wealth is ultimately going to be invested into the space. Growth seems obvious and evident. And then I'd say B is tying it to stock giving, right? Just knowing that the same thing is happening in stocks. There's a cool Schwab report that came out following COVID where their average account holder was 48 years old up until 2020. And then since 2020, that average has gone down to 35. It's a massive swing in terms of what the average stock investor looks like, which I think is largely driven by all of the crypto investing activity. I just see a larger percentage of giving in the sector moving to non-cash because it's ultimately so much more tax advantageous to do it. If donors are given the option and ultimately aware of the tax incentives to do so, it becomes kind of silly to set the money on fire via taxes.
Yeah, no setting it on fire, please. I think it's a really interesting point. In your point of view, with an average donation size of, you said 5 to 15,000, right? That's a comma 000 on average. Do you see that as the future of major gifts and major donations that the nonprofits are thinking about, and opening that up as the average age of donorship, and then we'll say within the wealth kind of shrinks and starts to move backwards with the crypto? Is that something that will impact the way that nonprofits need to look at major gifts moving forward?
Yeah, definitely. The leading nonprofits, I think right now, it seems, I think, relatively evident, but like the leading nonprofits tend to be ones that are emerging as being more capable of getting major gifts from younger donors, right? Like it's just because that's where the wealth is going. The average millionaire has gotten significantly younger on a year-over-year basis. The average investor has gotten significantly younger on a year-over-year basis, right? The technology to invest, new ways to give money, digital wallets versus credit cards, right? The way that people who have money give has changed really rapidly, and like some nonprofits have adapted to it. And who ultimately has the money has changed really rapidly, right? Just so much wealth has gotten younger over the past, 10 years. And with the great wealth transfer, it's going to be a significant swing. I think cryptocurrency is, of course, a big part, but I think crypto and stocks ultimately are the main pieces. Things like a house or a car ultimately just aren't as easy to transfer. You can transfer the rights to it, but ultimately what you have to do, you can't immediately liquidate things like that. There's always going to be this kind of drawn out process. But the fact that giving stocks and giving cryptocurrency can be as easy, if not easier, than giving with a credit card. The nonprofits, I'd say, who make that available to donors, and then obviously make it clear to these donors that there's additional tax incentives to give that way, are going to be the ones who get those donors who are giving $20 a month with a credit card, ultimately making their $50,000, $100,000, $1 million transfers on an annual basis to offset capital gains tax liability. The smart money historically has given non-cash assets. It's kind of used to be a thing that a lot of old money or elite individuals were aware of. They worked with financial advisors. They knew kind of the loopholes. It's becoming more common knowledge. I'd say, yeah, the only barrier there is like there's still a lot of nonprofits out there with stocks or crypto, right? Where they're like, you can send us an email, right? If you want to give this stuff, or like you'll see a nonprofit has like brokerage instructions on their website and they're like, we accept stocks. It's like, well, not for people under the age of 40 most of the time, right? Like some people will, of course, navigate that process, but not necessarily willingly. A lot more people will obviously park their money into donor advised fund accounts. Or kind of go elsewhere. The water's kind of going to flow to the lowest possible point. So, yeah, I guess that's what I expect to see. Crypto, I think, will become a larger part of it. I don't think it'll eat into the stock area and like take it over entirely. But I think if you're not effectively soliciting things like cryptocurrency and stock from high net worth individuals under the age of 40, then the odds of your major gift program getting eaten by a nonprofit who does is, I think, more or less a guarantee over the next 10 years.
No, that's good insight. I have a question, looks like from Ben T. I'm going to pop this up on the screen real quick. Philanthropies have done things like sell membership packages with rewards or host galas as a fundraising mechanism. Are NFTs as memberships something that nonprofits should consider? I know you touch on this to some extent in your annual report. My friend, the guy I follow, Gary Vee, it looks like y'all did some with his V Friends launch. That reminds me of this. Like, is this something that nonprofits should be considering? Is like NFTs is like almost like your membership card, your Costco card, where it's like such a pride that I can go and get my $1.50 hot dog. Is that the future, or at least a piece of it?
Yeah. I got to do a Twitter Spaces with Gary Vee, which was so fun. Because I've been following him for forever. I ended up fangirling out, which was shameful. I thought I would keep it together. I'm like, I'm not. He's not gonna. He started talking all fast. I was like, me too. He immediately changed who I was as a person within 30 seconds. His charisma is off the charts. The one thing I'll say with that, so this is a yes, again, back to the earlier comment of like, are you good at the internet? Are you good at fundraising? This again goes back to how technical you want to get and how far you want to take things. I would always look at the easiest point of entry and then stack on top of that. So if you're a nonprofit who doesn't accept crypto donations, accept NFT donations, have that easily discoverable on your website, have an other ways to give option where you can jump out of your regular donate page flow at the top of the menu. It's not at the bottom of your newsletter when it goes out. It's not embedded into your major gifts program. It's not a QR code in the mailer that goes into your direct mail. You're not asking about it on Giving Tuesday. It's just like the boring stuff, the foundational work of just like opening doors up to people who are already playing with this technology is the most important piece. A lot of nonprofits kind of skip that boring foundational work and will want to create their own DAO, mint their own NFTs, use NFTs as kind of a gift at a gala or a way to enter into a membership program. Those are awesome use cases and they're very exciting. They're oftentimes expensive. They're oftentimes time consuming. And then there's risk that it doesn't work out depending on your abilities, who you partner with, the timing in the market. whether or not your audience is interested. They're really fun and exciting. And if your team is bullish on it and, scoping it out ends up making sense, that's awesome. There are the most fun things we work on are things like that, right? Where we do an NFT drop on behalf of a charity and it raises millions of dollars, and we partner with the artists, we mint it through a platform. But there's baby steps, I'd say, to get there. If you're not fundraising crypto effectively, you don't have a process for accepting NFTs. Like we do that through Ren, for instance. I wouldn't start with that. But once you've got all the foundational work laid, then you can do things like that. It would be like, trying to build your own app for your nonprofit before having a website. I'd say sometimes nonprofits skip some of the baby steps.
No, that's great. And hopefully, Ben, that gives you some understanding. Yes, NFTs are definitely the chicken where the basics are the egg in this case, which is always good to outline. And as far as NFTs go, ahead on my list, that and stablecoin were the last two things I wanted to make sure we covered. I know both of those things were covered at your annual report. Again, there's like just a treasure trove of information there. Stablecoin, this was something that maybe was a little bit newer to me, but made sense once I got reading to it. Can you outline what stablecoin is for those that are either watching live or in the future on demand, and why that plays an important role moving forward for nonprofits?
Yeah, stablecoins are really cool. So I think stablecoins perform more like a cryptocurrency, which is what I think a lot of people think a cryptocurrency is, because it has currency in the name, which is, I think, one of the worst branding decisions of all time, because there's speculation on the price of something like a Bitcoin. So people get confused by it. It's like, how can it be money? Like, I don't even know what it'll be worth tomorrow, which is a reasonable consideration for a currency. So stable coins just peg their value rather than being a speculative asset like Bitcoin, where it could be worth more tomorrow, less tomorrow. It's always worth the price of something like a US dollar. So they peg their value to the value of an existing fiat currency, where they have a way to kind of like just regulate their price within a range of a couple cents. That allows people to do a couple things. It allows them to use cryptocurrencies as currencies if they want to move it from one account to the other or pay for goods. The money that people receive is ultimately exactly the same at the time that it's transferred. So for e-commerce and things like that, it's an excellent use case. And then for individuals who are traders and investors, ultimately, instead of them having to sell from cryptocurrencies into US dollars and ultimately have an on-ramp to buy back into it, they're able to kind of swap something like a Bitcoin for a stable coin. If you're on Ethereum, for instance, like they have their own stable coins they built onto that same network, things like USDC, where you can move into and out of it, and you're ultimately still participating in this ecosystem of cryptocurrencies. And you can, like, I guess, more quickly and efficiently move from, say, something like a USDC cryptocurrency pegged to the price of US dollar back into an investment like Ethereum on these platforms. So it allows you to, I guess, transfer value, specific amounts of value from one person to the other with more consistent, I guess, value. It's going to be exactly what it was at the time you sent it. And it allows for you to move out of a speculative investment decision where your money could go up or down into one where it's pegged and it's stable more instantaneously without exiting the network, which just takes out the complexity of on-ramps and off-ramps into things like fiat currencies like the US dollar. In terms of giving, it just allows people to give more specific amounts of money, right? When they're trying to give a specific amount of dollars, or for use cases where they want to do like monthly giving through smart contracts, whatever it might be. It takes out the complexity of knowing like what percentage of a unit of Ethereum would be $10 a month, right? It just allows for you to give more stable unit value. The one issue with stable coins, though, is that it doesn't have that same tax incentive, right? It's not a speculative asset, which means it hasn't appreciated. And if it hasn't appreciated, you don't get that additional write-off.
Apparently, I'm not going to learn about all this in one hour. So with that, the annual report, again, if you haven't read it on this, I'll send it out after email through this. You can also find it on the Giving Block's website. Pat, if I wanted to learn more about this or reach out to your team to see if crypto fundraising specifically is the right move or next step in the evolution of fundraising, how am I going to do this? Where am I? I know you guys are at the Bridge conference coming up here in a couple of weeks, as we are. So I'll send my team to run into your team and we'll have a Anchorman style powwow. But like, who am I? I'm sending just simply to thegivingblock.com, or where is it best to go learn more about this?
Yeah, definitely. So if you go on thegivingblock.com, like the first thing every nonprofit should do is like get a product demo and then do a deep dive on how they fundraise. So like the way we do product demos, if you go to thegivingblock.com and you just click accept donations, there's like two buttons. One is for donors to give. We have kind of a directory of charities that take crypto. And then the other button is just takes you to a demo. You book a demo to see how the actual product works. It's very important that nonprofits understand things like, again, it automatically sells for US dollars. The US dollars automatically get pushed to a bank account. The tax receipt automatically goes out to the donors. They're able to reconcile that. Like there's all these things that nonprofits, I think, start building out processes to work for. Getting the demo and making sure that you're not solving 15 problems that have already been solved. Like that's a huge time saver. And then the other piece there is making sure that you have a good understanding of how you fundraise, because I think nonprofits get into a lot of unnecessary complexity around like, will planned giving or major gifts or individual giving own this program? How will it impact the marketing team? How do we talk to our board about updating gift acceptance policies? That tactical conversation that we do in the demo conversations, I think is the other big time saver. So first thing I would do is go to thegivingblock.com and just sit down with someone for 30 minutes and run through these items, make sure that you reduce your checklist of things you're trying to figure out and just understand how the products work as baseline. And then second piece is to really figure out how you want to fundraise. Once you've had a conversation like that, some nonprofits really need the giving option. They need to integrate it effectively on their site, search engine optimized. How am I going to bury this into the bottom of emails as passive acceptance options? Versus some nonprofits are really going to go more proactive. It's going to be like one of the key strategies for earning net new younger donors in particular and growing them through a major gifts program. Knowing how you're going to integrate it tactically into your existing fundraising strategies is kind of the next step. But yeah, go to thegivingblock.com and you can learn about all that stuff.
Cool. And we got a couple good questions here, both from Gene. Does the Giving Block interface with CRMs used by nonprofits?
Tons. Yeah, we're integrated into all of the major ones. And then we have a Zapier integration, which allows us to plug into pretty much everything else. So all of the donor details and the transaction details get coupled and injected straight into the CRM.
Okay, perfect. And she had one more question. Does a charity need to have a special process for receiving crypto and having it available for use? A special crypto processing entity such as used in selling stock received?
Yeah, so that's very similar. Like our stock product is usually like, but I'll explain the stock product, which will help explain the crypto product. A lot of nonprofits have like a brokerage that they'll have an account with to accept stocks. That's kind of the legacy solution that they use with particularly donors above the age of 40. And then our stock product is ultimately the same process, but automated. So it's just collecting the donor details through a form, allowing the donor to issue the actual stock transfer, having that stock transfer detail and the donor detail go directly into our dashboard, and then through a CRM integration directly into your CRM. The stocks, when they hit the account, when the transfer occurs, are immediately sold for US dollars. And then those US dollars are pushed to the nonprofit's bank account. We're doing that same thing for crypto, except with crypto, it's more instantaneous just because cryptocurrencies are a lot more efficient than stocks. It's 24-hour market. So the process that a nonprofit who works with us has for accepting crypto is there's a copy and paste widget donation form that goes anywhere on a nonprofit site. The donor would pick the crypto they want to give and they'd issue the crypto donation. That crypto donation would hit an account that's tied to your nonprofit. The account has a program running 24 hours a day that will instantaneously sell that cryptocurrency for the going rate, whatever that cryptocurrency is priced at that moment. The US dollars are then immediately in that account, and once a week it just gets pushed into your bank account. All of that is completely automated, and there's no, you're never holding cryptocurrency. The second it hits that account, it's immediately sold. So no need to have a plan on how to use it. The second you receive it, it no longer is cryptocurrency. It's just sold for dollars.
No, that makes sense. And thanks for answering that. And we got one more that stuck in from Susan. I'll show it real quick. How do we steward? And I was really hoping this question was going to pop up, and I'm glad it did. How do we steward our crypto donors? We don't receive a name, a way to contact or thank them after the gift. And again, going back to the annual report, there's some really interesting statistics about the amount of people who actually end up volunteering their name and their information versus wanting to keep anonymous. What does this look like from what your team has experienced over the last handful of years?
Yeah, so this ultimately depends on the nonprofit's strategies. you can always turn off with the Giving Block the option to accept anonymous donations. Most of our nonprofits leave that option on just because it's actually the same with Facebook, which is funny. It's consistent across all giving methods. If you give donors the option to not stay in touch, they'll take that option, a decent percentage of the time. If you don't want to give them that option, you of course risk some donors not converting, but you can always make it mandatory for a donor to leave their details. If you have a specific stewardship process you value that more than the potential risk in conversion rate, that's totally fine. And then to your point, right, the vast majority of major gifts in particular in cryptocurrency, actually the donor does leave their details. So ultimately it's up to you and if you want to accept anonymous. If you've accepted anonymous donation, then of course the stewardship strategy, right? If you don't know those individuals, you don't even have an email, you can't steward them. When you have the donor's details, right? If you know who's given you cryptocurrency, the stewardship strategy is unique to the donor and then unique to the circumstances, right? So the main thing that we work on with nonprofits is responding to market dynamics. When there's a bull market, right, you want to make sure that all of your donors are aware of the tax incentives, you're reporting out to them on donations you are receiving. And then when there's things like a bear market, if the price movement is down, you just want to be kind of appropriate in your messaging. You wouldn't send out a donate cryptocurrency now type appeal. You'd probably follow up with them and be like, hey, we know the market has experienced a downturn. We appreciate your relationship and your gift. We're wondering what's the best way to move forward. If you want to help us network with folks in the space, if you still want to give this year, what that commitment would be, if you want to make a pledge and peg it to something like when Bitcoin returns back to $30,000 a unit. You just find ways to establish good rapport with the donors and respond to the market activity. Yeah.
Cool. That's perfect. And I haven't seen anything else run in, so we may be at the amount of time for Q&A. Pat, thank you for joining. It's been a really productive hour, and a couple of times we met before this. I've learned a lot, and always happy to connect with the Giving Block team. You all have a great set of people that are working to help nonprofits take advantage of this next evolution of a fundraising channel, right? Go to thegivingblock.com if you want more information, or to reach out with Pat and his team and see if this is the right step for you and your nonprofit. You can also find them at the Bridge Conference coming here August 2nd through the 4th, I believe. You also find GoodUnited there as well, so you can knock out two great fun teams in one shot there. Beverly, thanks for jumping in too. I see you on LinkedIn. Thanks for spending some time with us. Pat, if there's anything that, yes, absolutely, there will be a recording. It's already going to be live as soon as I hit the end broadcast on LinkedIn, as well as YouTube. I'll also send out an email this afternoon as a wrap up to provide links to those on-demand recordings, as we wouldn't want to leave you high and dry on that one. So, Pat, as always, thank you for joining on. I appreciate it. If there's anything that our team could do on behalf of help you out, let me know in the future. I'll be glad to bring it back at any point in the future. Too as well. And to all those that have jumped on, spent the last hour with us, thank you so much. Nonprofit Growth Lab will be back at some point in the next handful of months, but we do have that boot camp event coming up next, as well as some physical events between the Bridge Conference and then the virtual event with Peer-to-Peer Forum. Pat, again, thank you for joining. Any final words before we shut this one down?
No, thank you so much for having me. I enjoyed the conversation. It was fun to dig in.
Perfect. All right, awesome. Y'all have a great rest of the day. Kevin, good to see you on here too. Kevin Kramer, a good friend of GoodUnited. Anyways, y'all have a good one. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to myself or Pat and his team. Otherwise, have a great rest of the day.